looking at equations, and we're going to be solving equations. So first things first, we will, here, first example, we will have to write an equation, and then we have to solve it. So here we have a phrase, 3 times a number equals negative 3.6, 3 and negative 3 and 6 tenths. So how do we write that using math, using symbols? So 3 times a number. So that number, you're going to have to substitute that for a variable, so an unknown, so we can pick x as a letter. So you can write that as, let's do a here, 3x equals, you're going to use the equal sign, negative 3 and 6 tenths. Now, this is the equation. Now you have to solve. So 3 times what number equals negative 3 and 6 tenths? Well, if you think about it, you could probably do this in your head and get the answer, which is x equals negative 1 and 2 tenths. But if you can't get this number in your head, that's okay. There's a way to find this number, and it's doing the inverse operation. So if you're multiplying by 3 here, to find your answer, you're going to have to do the inverse. So what's the inverse of multiplying? You divide by 3, you're going to get your answer. And sure enough, 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 tenths divided by 3, 2 tenths. Let's do the second one. A number divided by 4 equals 1.5. So B, a number, so we can pick any letter we want. Let's pick a different one. Let's do M divided by 4. You can write it like that. Divided by 4 equals 1.5. Now you could probably do this in your head. What number do I divide by 4? Give me 1.5. And you could probably get 6. But if you can't get this in your head, that's okay. You can use the inverse operation. So to find your answer, you're going to do the inverse operation, which is you're going to multiply by 4. 4 times 4, 1 is 4. 4 times half is 2. 2 plus 4 is 6. Example 2. Now here, these ones here are a little bit more difficult, but you have to solve them using 2 steps. So you probably can't do this in your head because it's too complicated. 4.5 times a number, and then I subtract 3 and 2 tenths equals 18.5. So you'll have to use the inverse operations here. And because we're working our way backwards to find the solution, you're going to have to do the inverse of BEDMAS. So you have to get rid of your adding and your subtracting first. Then you're multiplying and dividing. So here, to simplify this, you're going to do the inverse operation of negative 3 and 2 tenths. So if I want to do the inverse of that, I'm going to add. I'm looking what number, if I subtract 3 and 2 tenths, gives me this number here. That's what I'm looking. I'm looking for the number. If I subtract 3 and 2 tenths, it's going to give me this number here. So to find that number, I just need to add 3 and 2 tenths. I do the inverse operation. So that's negative 15 and 3 tenths. So that means that this number here is equal to 15 and 3 tenths. Now, I want to find what number multiplied by 4.5 gives me negative 15 and 3 tenths. Now, you probably can't do this in your head. So same thing as above. If you can't do this in your head, you're going to have to do the inverse operation, which is you're going to have to divide, instead of multiplying by 4.5, you're going to have to divide this by 4.5. So how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to change these into fractions. So negative 153 tenths divided by 45 tenths. So your answer is negative 153 divided by 45. That's your answer. If you want to find out exactly what it is, you can say that 45 goes in there how many times? Twice is 90. 3 times is 135. So 135, and then you have a remainder 135, 15 and 3, 18, 45, 45ths. So that would be your answer, negative 3, 18 45ths. Second example. So you're looking for what number, if I add 3, I get 7.2. You can probably figure that out. What number do I add 3 to get 7 and 2/10? Well, that number has to be 4 and 2/10. And if you can't get 4 and 2/10, just do the inverse of adding 3. Just take away 3. Now, what number do I divide by 4 that gives me 4 and 2/10? If you can't do that in your head, some of you can, I'm sure, but if you can't, do the inverse. Multiply by 4. That's going to give me that number. So my variable is going to be 16.8. And that's true. And you can always check your work. If I put 16.8 here, 16 and 8/10, and I divide that by 4, that's going to give me 4 and 2/10. 4 and 2/10 plus 3, 7 and 2/10. I know I'm right. Let's do a final example. So a rectangle, so let's draw a rectangle. That's not really a rectangle. Let's draw it here using this. So a rectangle has side lengths, length of 3 and 7/10, and has a perimeter of 13.2. So that means that this side is also 3 and 7/10. We don't know this side, but we know that all together the perimeter is equal to 13 and 2/10. So you need to write an equation to help you to find the length. So we know that all together we have 2x and 6 plus 1, and so we have 3 and 7/10. 3 and 7/10. I have 6 and 14/10. So that's 7 and 4/10 is equal to 13 and 2/10. So now I'm looking for what number do I add 7 and 4/10 to give, that gives me 13 and 2/10. Well, if you can't do that number in your head, I'm looking for what number if I add 7 and 4/10 gives me. You can subtract 7 and 4/10 from that, and that'll give you this number here. So that means that this number here would be 13. So it'd be 5 and 8/10. And then you're looking for what number do I multiply by 2 that gives me 5 and 8/10. Well, if you can't do that in your head, some of you can, I'm sure, you can just do the inverse of multiplying by 2, which is just divide by 2. So 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. 2.5 plus 4/10 is 2 and 9/10. There you go. And that makes sense because if I put here 2 and 9/10 and 2 and 9/10, and if I add all four sides together, it does indeed give me 13 and 2/10. Because 9 and 9 is 18. 7 and 7 is 14. 18 plus 14 is 32/10. And then I'm adding another 10. So 10 plus 32/10 gives me 13 and 2/10. Here is the suggested practice. Make sure you check your work behind the book.